So, my research investigates the stigmatization of autistic college students. Stigma is the disapproval of a person or a group based on a characteristic that they're perceived to have, and it's associated with a variety of negative experiences and outcomes. Autistic people represent a stigmatized group. For example, autistic people are less likely to be hired than non autistic people, and additionally, non autistic people report being less willing to socialize with autistic people. We don't know a lot about specifically what impacts the stigmatization of autistic people. Some work, for example, is focused on the impact of diagnostic label, but interestingly, a common characteristic of autistic people hasn't been experimentally investigated. A majority of autistic people report at least one special interest. A special interest can be broadly defined as a highly focused interest and knowledge base in a specific topic that is intensely pursued. So if you can think of a topic, there's probably an autistic person somewhere who's an expert in it. And we were interested in further understanding factors involved in the stigmatization of autistic people, specifically social behavior and special interests, the latter of which has not previously been investigated in the context of stigma. So we recruited non-autistic college students at two universities. We had 324 participants between 18 and 24 years of age. On average, they were 19 years old and had completed 3 semesters of college, and 70% of our sample identified as women and 66% identified as white. So we had two social behavior conditions, non-autistic and autistic, and three special interest conditions, no special interests, common special interests, and an uncommon special interest. And we wrote 6 vignettes where the social behavior and special interests conditions were manipulated. And all participants read and responded to all vignettes. The topics were selected from research on the special interest topics of autistic and non-autistic people. For this study, we used the common topic category of history, with the specific exemplar being World War I, and the uncommon topic category of nature, with the specific exemplar being mushrooms and fungi. And you can see an example of our autistic uncommon special interest vignette here, but note that the vignettes that participants read were not underlined. And so after reading each vignette, participants responded to a social distance scale with items relevant to college student life. Social distance is a proxy measure for stigma and has been used to evaluate autism stigma in several previous studies. And so here are a couple example items, and you could respond to these items as definitely willing, probably unwilling, and definitely unwilling. And we predicted that autistic characters would be more stigmatized than non-autistic characters. And we also predicted that uncommon special interest would be more stigmatized than a common special interest, and that having no special interest would be the least stigmatized. Non-parametric tests were conducted, and a Bonferroni correction was calculated due to the number of comparisons. And so on the x-axis, we have non-autistic characters on the left and autistic characters on the right. And in the leftmost purple columns, we have no special interests. On the middlemost green columns, we have common special interests. And on the rightmost yellow columns, we have uncommon special interests. And each dot indicates a participant's score. And on the y-axis, we have mean summed social distance scale scores. So 0 would indicate no desired social distance or no stigmatization, and 39 would be the highest level of stigmatization that we could measure. And so supporting our first hypothesis, all autistic characters were more highly stigmatized than non-autistic characters. So these bars average around 28, while the non-autistic characters average between 7 and 13. However, our second hypothesis was not supported. Special interests only influenced the stigmatization of our non-autistic characters. And further, it was only presence of a special interest, not topic, that differentiated the social distance scale scores. And for autistic characters, we don't see this differentiation. So in line with previous research, we see that autistic college students are more stigmatized than their non-autistic peers. However, we see that non-autistic college students may not further stigmatize autistic peers for talking about a special interest. If one's behavior is already viewed as non-normative, adding a special interest doesn't seem to add additional stigmatization. And so it appears that the presence of a special interest may have a differential role in the stigmatization of autistic and non-autistic college students. And this has some interesting implications. For example, autistic people may use masking or camouflaging strategies to appear non-autistic, and for this group, talking about a special interest may still be somewhat stigmatizing. And overall, the high level of stigmatization of autistic people we see leads to the question, how do we prepare non-autistic people to think more inclusively about those who are different from them? Learning more about why autistic people are stigmatized is important for the development of anti-stigma initiatives, and ideally these will be developed and delivered in collaboration with autistic people. So thank you for taking the time to visit my poster. Feel free to email me with questions or comments at ks6hv@virginia.edu, or you can talk with me on Twitter. My handle is @CadenStockwell.